Satanism, devil worship.
Dangerous kind of devil worship comes in the form of underground cults.
Where I see devil graffiti and satanic graffiti, I see your name also. Do you feel a sense of responsibility, Oz?
Good evening. An East Arkansas town is stunned tonight after the apparent murder of 3 young boys.
3 kids, one, Damien Eccles, on death row for 18 years, 10 years in isolation, for a crime that he did not commit.
Off on hurting people or inflicting pain on the rest of the human race, or just because they didn't do anything to deserve what they got.
May 5th, 1993, in West Memphis, Arkansas, 3 8-year-old boys, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, left their homes to ride their bikes and never made it back. By the next afternoon, their bodies were found in a drainage ditch in a wooded area called Robin Hood Hills. What happened to them was brutal, confusing, and deeply unsettling, and from the very beginning, it raised more questions than answers. But instead of those questions leading to clarity, the case took a sharp turn. This wasn't just any moment in time. This was the early 90s, when fear of satanic rituals still lingered across the country, a time when rumors could spread faster than facts, and being different could make you a suspect. What should have been an evidence-driven investigation quickly became something else, something shaped by fear, assumptions, and a narrative people were already primed to believe. Within weeks, police focused in on 3 local teenagers, Jesse Miskelly, Jason Baldwin, and Damien Eccles. There was no physical evidence tying them to the crime. What set them apart was their image, black clothes and heavy metal music, and, in Damien's case, an interest in alternative spirituality, including a modern pagan belief system centered on nature and personal responsibility. It does not involve devil worship or belief in Satan, but in the cultural climate of the early 1990s, those distinctions didn't matter. In modern culture, they might have been seen as teenagers figuring themselves out, but in West Memphis in 1993, that was enough to label them murderers. The media gave them a name, the West Memphis 3, and despite the lack of evidence, all 3 were convicted. For nearly 2 decades, they sat in prison, punished for a crime they didn't commit. The West Memphis investigation unfolded during what sociologists called the Satanic Panic, when fear of ritual abuse spread across the United States. Talk shows, tabloids, and so-called experts convinced people that satanic groups were operating in plain sight. Things like heavy metal music, Dungeons and Dragons, and wearing black suddenly became red flags instead of just teenagers being teenagers. The bigger issue was that this fear didn't stay confined to the media. It seeped into police investigations and courtrooms. Sociologist Jeffrey Victor described the Satanic Panic as a cycle of fear in which belief alone creates real-world consequences. Once a community becomes convinced that something evil is happening, the damage becomes very real. West Memphis was primed for that kind of fear. At the center of it was a juvenile probation officer named Jerry Driver. Driver had become completely consumed by the idea that a satanic cult was operating in the town. He took this belief so seriously that he and another probation officer named Steve Jones would go into the woods during a full moon, searching for satanic gatherings, although they never actually found anything. Despite this, Driver was seen as an authority figure, and he presented himself as an expert on satanic activity. He kept a list of teenagers he believed were involved in devil worship. Among those names were Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miskelly, and Damien Eccles. Damien was a teenager Driver already knew well. He had a troubled past and had Driver as his probation officer prior. Jesse Miskelly, however, stands out as one of the most tragic figures in the story. He had significant learning difficulties, something that wasn't immediately obvious to people who met him. Jesse was known as a kind, helpful person who genuinely wanted to do right by others. Contrary to how the case was later portrayed, Jesse wasn't friends with Jason and Damien. They lived in the same trailer park, but they didn't hang out. Jesse was more of a typical small-town kid, into NASCAR and dreaming of becoming a professional wrestler. Jason Baldwin, on the other hand, was Damien Eccles' best friend.
Jason was my best friend. We did about everything together. It was kind of like we even lived together most of the time. Stayed at each other's houses, wore each other's clothes. It was more like we were brothers. We used to go out and snake hunt all the time. Snakes and music were like about our whole life, really. We were like all the time looking for new groups. Our favorite kinds of music were like Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth. We did just about everything together.
Most of the time he came up with the stupid ideas. Most of the time we didn't really set out to do anything in particular. We just started hanging around and whatever happened just usually happened.
They both loved listening to heavy metal and spent a lot of time together. Jason had a few minor run-ins with the law, like shoplifting and vandalism, but overall he was considered a good kid. He was a talented artist with plans to go to college for graphic design. Eccles was born Michael Wayne Hutchinson. He legally changed his name at 13 after admiring Father Damien, a priest known for his work in Hawaii. He took his last name from his stepfather, Jack Eccles. Damien grew up in extreme poverty, sometimes living in a trailer without indoor plumbing. He wore black after a girl once told him it looked good on him, and he developed an interest in the occult. Damien began getting into trouble with the law, which brought him into contact with Jerry Driver before the murders. During a search of his home, Driver found a notebook Damien called a Book of Shadows, filled with drawings and personal thoughts, along with books by Aleister Crowley, Stephen King, and Anton LaVey. To Driver, this confirmed his suspicions. To Damien, it was just part of being a curious, rebellious teenager. Before going any further into the case, it's important to focus on the real victims: Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore. All three boys were 8 years old and the best of friends. They were Cub Scouts and had each earned the rank of Wolf. Stevie Branch was the son of Pamela Hicks, who later married Terry Hobbs. Christopher Byers was the son of Melissa DeFar and was adopted by her husband, Mark Byers. Michael Moore was the son of Todd and Dana Moore, whose parents were still together. He was often described as the leader of the group and loved being a scout so much that he would wear his uniform even outside of meetings. The boys had been warned not to go into Robin Hood Hills, a wooded area nearby, but like a lot of kids, they went anyway. On the evening of May 5th, 1993, they were last seen riding their bikes together, with Christopher on the back of one. When they hadn't returned home, they were reported missing. Almost immediately, family members and volunteers began searching, combing through Robin Hood Hills late into the night. The next day, on May 6, 1993, at around 1:30 p.m., the search took a devastating turn. The bodies of all three boys were discovered by Steve Jones. Jones spotted a black shoe in a drainage ditch and stepped into the water to investigate. The mud was so thick it nearly pulled him under as he moved through the area. He disturbed the water, causing the body of Michael Moore to float to the surface. The other two, Christopher Byers and Stevie Branch, were found nearby. All three boys had been bound with their arms and legs tied and submerged in the water, held down by sticks. Their clothing was also recovered from the creek. The scene was horrific. Images from the crime scene are terrible. I am only showing blurry images, as they are extremely disturbing. You can look them up yourself, but I don't recommend it. Despite early rumors and speculation, there was no clear evidence suggesting anything beyond a tragic murder. When Steve Jones came across the bodies, his immediate reaction was to say, "It looks like Damien finally killed someone." The autopsies were conducted by Dr. Frank J. Peretti, the Arkansas State Medical Examiner. He concluded that Christopher Byers died from multiple injuries, while Michael Moore and Stevie Branch died by drowning. He also suggested a knife found near Jason Baldwin's home could have caused some of Christopher's injuries, but those findings have been widely challenged. The bodies had been exposed to the elements for nearly 24 hours, and later experts argued that animal activity, such as turtles in the creek, could explain the injuries that were initially interpreted as inflicted ones. There are also many claims questioning Peretti's credentials. The real issue is how uncertain his conclusions were. Later analysis even challenged early claims of bite marks, suggesting they were likely caused after death. Ultimately, the exact cause of death remains uncertain. As the investigation began to stall, pressure mounted on law enforcement to find answers. Chief Inspector Gary Gitchell and his team were desperate for a lead. They reached out to Jerry Driver, who quickly pushed the theory that the murders were part of a satanic ritual. Just 2 days after the bodies were discovered, police questioned Jason Baldwin and Damien Eccles at Baldwin's trailer. During that interaction, Damien made a series of inappropriate comments, clearly trying to be shocking. He speculated about the crime, referred to it as a thrill kill, and made disturbing remarks about the killer. Many years later, Damien admitted he was a dumbass and didn't make excuses for his behavior. While it was the kind of behavior you might expect from a teenager trying to get attention, those comments immediately put him in police crosshairs. This is when investigators largely stopped pursuing other leads and began focusing almost entirely on Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin. Damien voluntarily provided hair and blood samples and even took a polygraph test, though the results were never officially filed. Jesse Miskelly became involved shortly after through a woman named Vicki Hutchinson, who lived in the same trailer park. Police asked her if she knew anyone involved in satanic activity, and she named Baldwin and Echols. With encouragement from investigators, she began her undercover investigation. She approached Jesse, who occasionally babysat her children, and asked him to talk to Damien. Jesse, wanting to help someone he thought was a friend, agreed. Vicki claimed that Damien invited her to a ritual gathering, which she attended with Baldwin, Echols, and Miskelly. She described people using names like Snake, Spider, and Lucifer, and said she became uncomfortable and asked Damien to take her home, all of which she later admitted she made up. But at the time, police took it seriously. Not long after, Jesse was brought in for questioning. At 17 years old, with an IQ of 72, placing him in the range of borderline intellectual functioning, what followed was a deeply troubling interrogation. Jesse was not properly read his rights, had no lawyer present, and didn't understand that he could ask for one. Investigators used intimidation tactics and showed him graphic crime scene photos, which left him terrified. He was questioned for roughly 12 hours, and after nearly 10 hours, he gave a confession. But here's the thing. Only 46 minutes of that interrogation were recorded. That confession was riddled with inaccuracies. Jesse claimed the murders happened around noon, even though the boys went missing in the evening. He said they were tied with rope when they had been bound with their own shoelaces. Each time he got something wrong, investigators corrected him, feeding him details until he repeated them back. Despite all of this, that confession became the foundation of the case. Once investigators had a version of events that fit their theory, everything else began to build around it, even when the facts didn't. Both Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin were arrested at Baldwin's trailer. From the start, Damien's attitude didn't help him. He came across as flippant and sarcastic, which played badly not just with law enforcement, but with the public as well. Jason Baldwin, in contrast, was a quiet, soft-spoken Christian. He believed wholeheartedly that God wouldn't allow him to be convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Meanwhile, Jesse Miskelly was in an entirely different situation. He didn't fully understand what was happening. He believed that by confessing, he would be allowed to go home. When he finally met his attorney, he didn't even realize who the man was, and at one point reportedly asked what Satan even meant, highlighting just how out of his depth he was. The trials were deeply controversial. Jesse was tried separately, while Baldwin and Echols were tried together. A major piece of evidence against all three was Jesse's confession, despite inconsistencies and the circumstances under which it was obtained. Much of it didn't line up with known facts, but it was still allowed to influence the proceedings. Prosecutors leaned heavily into the narrative of a satanic ritual. They focused on the teens' music, clothing, and interests, especially Damien's fascination with the occult, including the writings of Aleister Crowley, a British writer and mystic known for cultivating a controversial image and associated with rebellion and counterculture. The prosecution essentially argued that an interest in the occult, combined with a violent crime, pointed to a ritualistic killing. The defense pushed back with the lack of actual evidence. There were no eyewitnesses, no physical evidence tying any of the three to the crime, and no credible forensic link. But in the end, it didn't matter. The jury found them guilty. Jason and Jesse were sentenced to life, while Damien was sentenced to death. While in prison, each was profoundly shaped by what they endured. Jason Baldwin grew in a quieter way, holding on to his faith as a strong moral compass. Jesse Miskelly's intellectual disability made the experience especially overwhelming. He became more withdrawn and private, carrying the emotional burden of everything that had happened to him. Damien, who endured the extreme conditions of death row, experienced one of the most profound transformations, evolving from a troubled, defiant teenager into a deeply reflective and spiritually focused adult. He relied on meditation, reading, and personal study to survive the crushing isolation. That isolation also took a lasting physical toll. After years without normal exposure to natural light, his eyes became permanently sensitive, and he now has to wear sunglasses all the time because daylight is overwhelming. In 1996, a woman named Lori Davis reached out to him, and their connection grew into a relationship. They eventually fell in love and married in a Buddhist ceremony in 1999. Lori Davis played a pivotal role in bringing national attention to the West Memphis Three, tirelessly advocating for their innocence. Her relentless efforts helped mobilize public support and sparked a widespread movement that ultimately contributed to the campaign for their release. Despite their different paths, all three lost their youth behind bars and were forever shaped by years of confinement and the psychological toll of being imprisoned for a crime they consistently maintained they did not commit. As they remained incarcerated, public interest in the case continued to grow. Advances in forensic science raised new questions, and DNA testing ultimately excluded all three men. Thanks to the help of Lori Davis, a coalition of musicians and actors rallied around the West Memphis Three, turning what began as a small-town case into an international spotlight. Eddie Vedder was one of the earliest and loudest supporters, helping fund DNA testing. Henry Rollins, formerly of Black Flag, organized benefit tours to raise money for appeals. Johnny Depp helped fund legal efforts and publicly declared he believed 1,000% that Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly were innocent. Filmmaker Peter Jackson also contributed significant funding for advanced forensic testing. For many of these artists, the case wasn't just troubling, it felt personal. The prosecution treated music, clothes, and unconventional beliefs as if they were evidence, turning self-expression into suspicion and fear into a verdict. That's why the celebrity support mattered. It wasn't about fame or phoning it in. It was about a shared sense that something about this case didn't add up. In 2011, after nearly 18 years behind bars, the state of Arkansas offered the West Memphis Three an Alford plea, a controversial legal agreement that allows a defendant to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that the prosecution claims to have enough evidence for a conviction. Accepting the deal meant immediate freedom, but it came with a heavy cost. The case would not be reopened, and no further investigation into the real killer would take place. Faced with that choice, all three men agreed to the plea. Jason Baldwin was initially against it and wanted to continue fighting for full exoneration, but he ultimately changed his mind when he realized that if they lost at trial, Damien would be executed. With the plea accepted, all three were released from prison. Legally, their convictions remained in place, and the case was considered closed. In reality, however, it left many unanswered questions. The Alford plea allowed the state to preserve the original verdict while avoiding a full re-examination of the evidence, meaning the murders of 8-year-old Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore are officially solved, but still deeply unresolved. Almost from the moment of the arrests in 1993, and after the convictions, many alternate theories about who actually committed the murders began to circulate. Some are speculative, others are rooted in overlooked evidence, inconsistencies, and witness statements that were never fully pursued. What follows are the most prominent alternate theories that continue to be debated today. The Mr. Bojangles theory. One of the earliest and most persistent alternative leads is what's known as the Mr. Bojangles theory. On the night of May 5th, 1993, the same night the boys disappeared, a man described as muddy, disoriented, and possibly injured entered a Bojangles restaurant in West Memphis. Employees said he appeared to have blood on him and was behaving erratically. He went into the bathroom, where he left behind what looked like blood and mud, and then disappeared.
So you did not go in the restroom?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever find this bleeding black man?
No, sir, I did not.
Do you have a report that you made regarding this incident?
No, sir, I do not.
And you're out looking for some boys, and you're out in that area, and you hear about someone bleeding. Did anything go off in your mind thinking that something may be going on?
Okay, different ward. I did not connect it to at all.
Well, Patrolman, it may have been outside your ward, but distance-wise between the area where you were looking and where this restaurant was, it's not a long distance, is it?
No, sir, it's really not.
Okay.
Did any other officer come out there that evening?
Not that evening.
Were you working on the date of May 6th of 1993?
Yes, sir. 2 detectives came out and they took a report as far as what I'd seen, description of the gentleman, and then they took blood scrapings off the wall.
All right, Detective Rich, what is the date that you sent the blood scrapings off to the crime lab to be analyzed?
They were never sent.
They were never sent?
That's correct.
All right, where are the blood samples at this time?
I don't know, sir. They're lost.
They're lost?
Yes, sir, that's my mistake. I lost a piece of evidence.
His condition matched someone who had just come out of the woods, and the timing aligns almost perfectly with the murders. There's also the account of a child witness who said he saw one of the boys speaking to a tall, thin black man after school that day. While child testimony is often questioned, some believe his description lines up with the man seen at Bojangles. Despite this, the man was never identified, and the lead simply faded away. The stranger theory. Another possibility is that this was the work of a stranger, an opportunistic offender with no connection to the victims, someone passing through, someone the boys crossed paths with by chance. This theory is supported by the lack of a clear motive tying the teenagers to the crime and the chaotic nature of the scene itself. But without a suspect, a name, or a confession, it's a theory that's difficult to prove. The serial killer theory. The more extreme theory is that a known serial killer was responsible. The name most often brought up is Edward Edwards, a convicted killer who claimed involvement in numerous high-profile cases, but this theory is widely rejected. Edwards was known for seeking attention, and there's no credible evidence linking him to West Memphis. It relies almost entirely on speculation. John Mark Byers. John Mark Byers was the stepfather of Christopher Byers. John was among one of the first out searching for them, though in the days that followed, attention began to shift toward him. His behavior, later seen in the documentary Paradise Lost, came across as volatile, emotional, and at times unsettling. That scrutiny only intensified during filming when he gifted a knife to the documentary crew, which was found to contain traces of blood. This led to Byers being called to testify about the knife during the trial of Damien and Jason. In the later years, speculation followed, including conflicting statements, rumors involving what looked like bite marks on the victims, and why he had his teeth removed. But when examined more closely, the case against him doesn't hold up. The timeline doesn't align, and there is no definitive forensic evidence connecting him to the murders. Even the knife, despite the controversy surrounding it, was never linked to the crime. In the years that followed, Byers was eliminated as a suspect based on his DNA. He also became an outspoken supporter of Damien, Jason, and Jesse, openly stating that he does not believe they were responsible for his son's death.
This is not right, and the people of Arkansas need to stand up and raise hell, but they're innocent. They did not kill my son. And this is wrong, what the state of Arkansas is doing to cover their ass.
John passed away in 2020 at the age of 63 from complications related to heart issues. Many now believe his behavior reflected overwhelming grief, stress, and possible substance use, not guilt.
Believe is the real killer.
Terry Wayne Hobbs.
Amen.
What makes you so sure that it's Terry Hobbs who's the real killer?
Well, his DNA was found there in the lace of Michael Moore. David Jacoby's hair was there. What did it do, fly there on Harry Potter's wand? There's no other two ways about it.
Terry Hobbs. One of the most serious and controversial alternative suspects is Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of Stevie Branch. According to witness accounts, he may have been the last adult seen with the boys. A neighbor said they saw him calling out to them shortly before they disappeared. Hobbs has a documented history of violence and gave conflicting statements about his whereabouts that night. Initially, he claimed he was home, but his wife was at work and could not confirm this. Years later, he stated that he was with his friend David Jacoby, though Jacoby disputed being with him for the entire time. Additional details also raised questions, including family members describing his behavior that evening, such as cleaning and doing laundry, as unusual. Stevie's sister has said that Hobbs was abusive, something Hobbs himself has admitted. In 2007, advanced mitochondrial DNA testing found a hair consistent with Hobbs tied within a ligature used to bind one of the boys, as well as another hair consistent with David Jacoby on a tree stump at the crime scene. While that type of DNA isn't definitive, many argue it should have led to a deeper investigation. Terry Hobbs has consistently denied any involvement and has never been charged. However, when I look at all of the information, the inconsistencies and everything surrounding that night, I'll be honest, this is the theory that makes the most sense to me out of all the alternate suspects, and I personally find it to be the most compelling. I do want to be clear that this is simply my personal opinion based on the information available. It is not a statement of fact or an accusation, and that's really the point. When you look at all of these alternative theories, none of them come with certainty. But what they do reveal, over and over again, are the gaps, the missed opportunities, and the questions that were never fully pursued. Because this case isn't just about who did it, it's about what happens when an investigation stops being guided by evidence and starts being shaped by pressure, assumptions, and belief. Once the goal quietly shifts from let's find the truth to let's defend our theory, the truth becomes disposable. And in West Memphis, that shift happened fast. The lead investigator, Gary Gitchell, has faced heavy criticism for an approach that many felt looked less like objective police work and more like the influence of the Satanic panic, fueled in part by information coming from probation officer Jerry Driver. From the very beginning, the focus wasn't on what could be proven. It was on who looked different enough to blame. Heavy metal music, black clothes, and a non-conforming teenager, these things were treated like evidence. And it's frustrating, because if you were a teenager in the 90s or early 2000s, that description wasn't rare. But being different doesn't make someone a killer. This wasn't following the evidence. This was picking a villain and building a story around them. Eccles wasn't some random name that surfaced through solid investigative leads. He was already known to local authorities, already labeled, already seen as a problem, and that familiarity became a shortcut. They didn't just investigate a crime, they built a narrative, and once they committed to it, everything else was filtered through that lens. After their release, the lives of the West Memphis Three followed very different paths. Jason Baldwin co-founded Proclaim Justice, dedicating his life to advocating for the wrongfully convicted. Jesse Miskelly chose to step away from the public eye, living a quieter and more private life. Meanwhile, Damian Eccles has remained the most visible voice, continuing to push for advanced forensic testing in the hope of uncovering long-awaited answers. And now, decades after the murders, that search for truth is entering a new chapter. In recent years, legal teams and advocacy groups have worked to have remaining evidence retested using modern DNA technology, including more sensitive methods such as MVAC DNA collection. These efforts aim not only to further establish the innocence of the West Memphis Three, but also to identify the person or persons truly responsible for the murders. Although challenges remain, such as disputes over access to evidence and concerns about items that were reportedly lost or destroyed, the push for testing represents a renewed opportunity for clarity in a case long clouded by controversy. Even now, this case is not simply about clearing names. It is about discovering what really happened. At the center of it all are three young boys, Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore, whose lives were taken far too soon. Their families were shattered, their community was divided, and decades later, that divide has yet to fully heal. When people are pushed into choosing sides instead of searching for the truth, those fractures can last for generations. Justice must be built on evidence, not fear, not assumptions, and not the desire for a clean, convenient ending. The families deserve answers, and maybe the reason this case continues to linger after all these years is something simple. When an investigation goes off track at the very beginning, the truth can be buried alongside the evidence, sometimes for decades, and sometimes forever. Thanks for watching. Remember to stay curious, stay safe, and stay skeptical.